have Shotgun Willie's, you walk into 8 stages of beautiful ladies dancing. Pictures of shotguns, pictures of women dressed in Western attire. It's wild, it's fun. The best show on earth.
The Shotgun Willie's vibe is totally like, yeah, you're in the West. We wear our cowboy boots with our cowboy hats. It was very classy clientele, so you hustle them as long as you can.
But working at a strip club is a risky business. If someone targets you, you can disappear.
When Jennifer went missing, it was a scary shock to all of us. Jennifer was the girl next door.
Single mom, hardworking girl who would have done anything for her kid, had a dream to open her own coffee shop one day.
She had to be taken against her will.
When we searched the laptop, we found over 300 images of women either being tortured or killed.
It's incredibly disturbing. The case morphed into something much greater and bigger.
We called it Operation Snowball because the more you look into it, the worse it got. We were dealing with someone diabolical.
In the early 2000s, Shotgun Willie's in Denver was the place to be if you were anybody. That was like, we gotta go to Shotguns, don't tell our wives, no.
He's a trailblazer. Ooh.
The Shotgun Willie's vibe is totally like, yeah, you're in the West, you know, we wear our cowboy boots with our cowboy hats. All throughout the night, you'd be like, okay, ladies, round up and get on stage. We're gonna do the 2-step. It got the whole crowd really riled up and having fun. It was very classy clientele. You know, the cover charge at the door is not cheap.
The Nugget players are going in there, the Bronco players are going in there, and also you would see congressmen in there, the Senate in there.
My first stroll at Shotgun Willie's, I was a young guy with long hair, wild and crazy, and I had to work the door. And I really enjoyed it, and I moved right up the chain. During the day, we have regular guests that have been coming in there for 40 years. Men that have been married for decades, and no one wants to hear their stories anymore. No one wants to hear about their high school touchdowns or the time they were #1 in sales at their job. If you're easy to talk to and you're a good listener, you're making money. Hands down, that's how to do it. We see guests on their best days and their worst days. There's risks, and you have to use your head and be careful. I first met Jennifer Markham when she came to do the amateur contest. We've been doing the amateur strip-off for 30 years. It's where we meet a lot of our new entertainers. The customers judge the contest, and Jennifer was a beautiful woman, big, bright, pretty eyes, and so she won the strip-off, of course. She took the job, and we were glad to have Jennifer join the crew. Jennifer's persona on stage, you know, the girl next door. She had that Midwestern charm. She was very athletic, so she was strong, a good dancer, and just, you know, in great shape.
Everybody liked her. She was really outgoing and just, you know, a joy to be around.
She was making money and doing a really good job, and then she stopped coming to work. She didn't respond to any messages, just stopped coming. You know, which is unusual. Usually when the girls, you know, they go through stages, they stop coming to work, they'll message me or call me and say, hey, Maddie, I'm gonna be doing this, this, or this. You know, I'll see you never again, or maybe I'll see you in 6 months. The first thing I did, you know, was check with her friends, and nobody had seen her or heard from her.
It was strange that Jennifer wasn't showing up. She looked happy to be there. She took her job seriously. Everyone is talking about it. Like, nobody knows where Jennifer is. Like, you know, this is so weird. Have you heard anything about her, or have you seen her?
Jennifer's father called me at work at the club. He seemed very distraught. It was an alarming call because I had no idea, what was going on with Jennifer at all. And it was scary because he didn't either.
As Jennifer's parents' concern continued to grow because they couldn't find their little girl, they reached out to hospitals. They called police departments. They grew more and more desperate. Jennifer's father, Bob Markham, told the police that it wasn't unheard of for her to go weeks without them hearing from her, but this time they felt that something was different, something was wrong.
Working at a strip club is a risky business. That is a vulnerable lifestyle to where if someone targets you and wants to take advantage of you, you can disappear. And with Jennifer, it was like she dropped off the face of the earth.
She was using her phone until her phone goes offline on February 17th, 2003. No one had talked to Jennifer again. And then police learned that Jennifer Markham's car was located at Denver International Airport. It had been parked there on February 17th, 2003. But there were absolutely no records of her boarding any flight, domestic, international, or otherwise. It appeared that Jennifer vanished. The police said there was no indication of foul play. They didn't have physical evidence. There was nothing really for the police to do. And so there was no police investigation.
But in general, when you're an adult, you're allowed to go missing, especially if that's your pattern of life.
There's always hope because Jennifer was such a free spirit that she just did go away somewhere and just hasn't made it back. But it just broke my heart for her family. I ran into her mother. You could see the heartache in her eyes. I met Jennifer in 3rd grade. I was the new student in the class, and she instantly became my best friend. She would come over to my house, and we'd like to dress up and pretend like we're Cyndi Lauper and dance around the room. She always had this little dimple right here. And when she smiled, that dimple just popped out all the time. She was a vibrant, adventurous child. As she got older, she became a protector of her 2 younger siblings. No matter what was happening, you knew that if you had her with you, she would take care of you. I would describe Jennifer as a total free spirit. She was just excitement to be around. She would be the girl that would be like, oh, let's go on vacation, don't know where, we'll just get in the car and go. That's Jennifer. She is always off and out doing a new adventure.
Jennifer was also a single mom, like many of us in the industry, and just, trying to make ends meet and have a good life for her kid.
She was a stripper, yes, but that is not who she was. That was not her career. You just want to do what's best for your children.
Her child would split his time between Jennifer and the child's father. And Jennifer was a woman who tried to do right by her son, who had a dream of doing better for herself. And she had hopes to open her own coffee shop of her own one day.
She's that mom that would be at every function that her kid would do, that would be at every class party that her kid would have, just want to be a part of every piece of her child's life.
Shotgun Willie's was one of the last places she was known to ever be. So Jennifer Markham's father, Bob, raised money to put a billboard above Shotgun Willie's for his missing daughter.
Once I saw that billboard, it did bring all the memories back. It really grabbed your heart. Everybody was talking about it again. I mean, it was like a member of the family had disappeared. We were all desperately waiting for an answer.
I was thinking, this is terrible. Something bad's happened. This is a smart lady. She has everything to live for. She had to be taken against her will.
Bob Markham reached out everywhere to anyone who would listen to his story about his daughter. And unfortunately, because of the life she led, not many people were willing to listen. When I heard about Jennifer's story, it pissed me off that nobody was really talking about it. Bob and I spent a lot of time on the phone together, and through all of his pain, through all of his despair, he never gave up hope, but the Markhams didn't have any luck, and time just continued to go by.
Investigators told Bob a confidential informant reached out to the FBI saying he had information about Jennifer Markham's disappearance, that he had heard from a couple different people, but he wasn't otherwise involved, and that he would like to meet with her parents. So in the summer of 2005, FBI handlers set up a meeting in a park in the North Denver area with Bob Markham and their confidential informant.
The informant told Bob that Jennifer's boyfriend was in prison for drug charges and that Jennifer was killed because she was going to testify against him.
Bob Markham knew that Jennifer's boyfriend was Steve Ennis. Steve was running a large ecstasy ring. The feds caught wind of it.
While Steve Ennis was incarcerated, Jennifer Markham and him remained in a committed relationship.
She told her dad he was the one. She was head over heels for this guy. Her dad could hear it. He knew that she really loved him.
So Bob Markham didn't buy what the informant was selling. He thought Steve had nothing to do with Jennifer's disappearance.
And Bob Markham told me he was stunned that this man actually offered to take him to Jennifer's burial site. At that point, Bob Markham was convinced that the informant was responsible for Jennifer's death. How else would he know where she was?
Working at Shotgun Willie's at the beginning of shift, you immediately go to the dressing room. The manager would come out with a clipboard, check our outfits. The dress code has to be right, your makeup has to be right, and they are very strict about this. When you've really hooked that customer, that's when you pop the question, would you like to buy me off the list?
I think it's about time for me to put my whiskey goggles on.
And that's where they're paying you by the hour to sit with them. That's how you really rake in the dough. You kind of like set your own price, and that's something you would really negotiate with the guy. You know, some girls might be like, oh, $300 an hour, that's fine. I'd be like, $500 plus you have to tip me when I dance. So you hustle them as long as you can. The most I made was $8,000 one night. But what you will run into with these regulars is eventually they want you to go home with them.
If a guest is too intense, I have a chat with them and say, hey, remember, this is make believe, sir. This is not reality. Wake up, sir, wake up. We take club safety very, very seriously. So when Jennifer went missing, it was a scary shock to all of us.
Matt told us that we all need to be really careful. Most of the girls there would know not to go home with a customer, plus we have the security in place. But it's just, it makes you second think, who was she involved with, really? And yeah, maybe I questioned if it was a customer from the club. It definitely made me feel a little scared.
After this meeting in the park with the informant, Bob told the FBI that the informant was the killer. But the FBI said that he had saved lives before as an informant, that they believed that his information was good information, and said they couldn't disclose the informant's identity.
When I spoke with Bob Markham, he just knew she was gone. Bob felt that, you know, like as any good father would feel, that maybe he could have done more to try to help bring her home. Bob wanted to give her a proper funeral, a proper burial. But Bob was afraid that he'd meet a similar fate if he let the CI take him to Jennifer's burial site. Bob Markham was heartbroken. What he really wants is closure, and until he knows the location of Jennifer's remains, he's never going to get it. Jennifer's family's frustrations mounted further with the lack of progress in the investigation. And the Markhams certainly felt that it was a stigma. She was a stripper.
The entertainers come from all different kinds of backgrounds. These are normal women that are doing that job mostly for their children, to provide a good life for them. They're paying their bills off, they're helping the family out, and you kind of go to the next stage in their lives.
There are psychologists that I worked with at Shotguns. There are teachers. There's every profession that you can think of where these women worked at the club to have extra income.
I had been waitressing and going to school to get a degree in radiology, and I needed to make more money. The entertainer's dilemma is not being accepted by society. It is sad that there's such a stigma attached to it. You know, I was cautious as to who I would tell that I was an entertainer because people would judge me. Jennifer was one of us in the club just trying to make ends meet.
At the same time, back in 2006, local police department here in Colorado were looking at a man by the name of Scott Kimball for a variety of check fraud schemes that had occurred in the area. They suspected that he had taken $80,000 that didn't belong to him.
Detective Gary Thatcher was assigned the case. Gary goes to find Scott to ask him about the check fraud forgeries, but Scott's in the wind. So he contacts his wife, who's Lori McLeod, and she said she would come in and talk to Detective Thatcher.
Do you know if he owed anybody money, or, I mean, was he, like, in debt to somebody?
No. Not that I know of.
You know, he took, you know, somewhere around $86,000.
I had no clue.
When did you talk to him?
Last night.
Last night.
He said, I miss you. And he told me that he was an informant for the FBI. He said that there's an ongoing case that I know very little about. I know it involves Jennifer. She went missing, and apparently she's not missing, she's dead.
So Scott was just a witness to this, or?
He told me that was all I needed to know.
That wasn't what Detective Thatcher was expecting when he was working a check fraud case. To have an FBI informant suddenly in the middle of it, and a case with a girl who had gone missing.
Lori then begins telling him that Scott Kimball has also been associated with another missing woman. Her daughter, Casey McLeod.
She was 19 at the time. She called on the phone and she asked to talk to me, and she said, I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry and I love you. And she hung up, and that was the last thing I ever heard from her. She's now 22. I found out later she stayed at a hotel for a couple of days. Scott's the one that picked her up from the hotel to take her to work. And she hasn't been seen since.
When has she been missing since?
Since August 21st of 2003.
How long have you been married to Scott?
Since August 31st of 2003.
Okay.
And to be perfectly honest, at first I thought Scott knew where she was. And that's sort of why I kind of wanted him in my life.
He doesn't know anything about where she's at?
Nobody does.
Lori was conflicted because she was finding out that a lot of what Scott had told her was not true. So while she thought Scott had been trying to help, she also wondered if Scott was involved in her daughter, Casey's disappearance. So she gave law enforcement his cell phone number and 2 bags that contained all of Scott's receipts surrounding Casey's disappearance, along with Scott's laptop. When Detective Thatcher searched the laptop, he found over 300 images of women either being tortured or killed.
We have entertainers working there from all over the U.S., and this is show business. You need to have a stage name. Sometimes if the girls can't come up with a name, I have a baby book, and I say, come on, pick a name out of here. And then that is their identity when they're in the club. I don't know these girls' real names, probably none of them. And there's hundreds that work for me. I know their stage names.
I don't think anybody is like 100% just themselves when they are in that industry. You definitely have to be an actress for sure. But with Jennifer, she was just such a sweetheart on and off stage.
It's incredibly disturbing to all of us that Scott Kimball has these kind of images on his computer. Detective Thatcher stumbles across these horrific scenes of sexual abuse, rape, strangulation, murder of women. It was clear that Scott Kimball was not just a white-collar criminal like he showed on paper.
There were not only photos, but videos. But they weren't Jennifer and they weren't Casey, so it was a big mess. Detective Thatcher ended up calling the FBI to see what was going on and wanted to know if Scott was an agent or an informant or what. And the FBI told him that, yes, he's an informant, he's not an agent, and he's helping with missing people, specifically Jennifer Markham. And Detective Thatcher said, yes, I've heard that name, but I've also heard that he's responsible for maybe other missing people, including Casey McLeod. So at that point, everybody was trying to figure out what was going on.
FBI then assigned Agent Johnny Grusing to the case, and together they team up to begin fully investigating Scott Kimball.
Detective Thatcher and I learned that in July 2002, Scott was serving time for a check fraud forgery charge in Colorado, and he reached out for the FBI.
Scott told the FBI that he knows of a murder-for-hire plot, but he needed to get out of jail in order to assist them. By that point, he had already informed on other important cases to the FBI. So he was released from jail, and he was out providing that information to law enforcement, and eventually, Scott goes off the grid.
You don't really have supervision when you're an informant, and we don't check up on them, nor do we have any mechanism to do so.
When he stopped working for the FBI, a warrant was activated for that old check fraud forgery sentence that he owed.
As I reviewed the file, the light bulb just clicked on, and then we connected the dots. Scott Kimball was the informant who met in the park with Jennifer's dad, Bob Markham.
We needed to find Scott Kimball in order to find out what information he has in the disappearance and murder of 2 women.
We got a lot of stuff to talk about. What we have around you is a bunch of missing people, Jennifer Markham and Casey. We're pretty convinced that you had something to do with their disappearances.
I disagree. So if you're asking me if I know where Jennifer or Casey is, the answer is no. And if you're going to ask me if I've hurt any of them or killed any of them, the answer is no. So wherever else from there we need to go, I'll be glad to help you.
You know, you're looking at a lot of time.
Absolutely. Right. I'm not guilty of that. I am 100% convinced I will beat that in any jury trial, and I will not plead to that. I didn't do it.
Okay. I was used to being the FBI coming in. People would be a little thrown off, intimidated. Not with him. He was in charge. He knew that his information was much more important than anything I had to say. We don't know the truth, and that's what you've got going for you now. You have that knowledge we don't have. So what happened with Jennifer?
As far as what part? she flies off the radar.
Our job is just to keep doing this, keep putting pressure on until we get to the bottom of it.
You can do what you want to do. You can do what you feel is best. Because I've learned just now in this interview that when I'm honest with you guys, it doesn't hold anything.
Yes, it does.
It does not. It's my right. It's my constitutional right to not incriminate myself. Charge me or let me go. This is done.
We're here on behalf of the Markham family and on the McLeod family. They want their daughters back to bury them. They're at their wits' end. They want to do everything they can to get the girls back. And they want to know what happened to them. And if you can help us...
You know what, I can't stress to you enough. I have told you guys and I've been honest with you guys about everything I know with those. It's, you know, maybe you guys should just take me back to my cell.
He's playing cat and mouse with what happened to all these missing people, and he loved that. The advice I got was you're going to have to be patient with him and then let his narcissism just run, then he will talk to you.
Okay.
All right, well,
They're ready to take you back in the booking, so.
If you guys want to quit and give up, that's fine. It's up to you guys.
you're not going to give us anything, Scott.
I can tell you more about Jennifer, but I don't want to be incriminated. I need some immunity. Once I explain everything to you, it may very well help you recover Jennifer, but you know, I don't have a exact location. I just know from what I've been told where she would be found. But I can't tell you anything as long as I don't have any kind of immunity. I just can't do it.
Scott knows the game. He knew how to get something for himself out of any conversation that he ever had. But wanting immunity for something as serious as the disappearance and murder of an individual is never going to happen. We believed Scott Kimball was involved with, in some way, the disappearance and murder of Casey McLeod and Jennifer Markham. But our belief is completely circumstantial. We had nothing at that point. We needed to reinvestigate anyone who had any information or potential connection to Jennifer Markham.
The FBI did come to talk to me. I did take the agents to see Jennifer's locker. Anything that I could do or any of my team could do to help, we wanted to help. That it is a family, and I think people in Denver like the fact that it's a family business opened by a woman, did it all herself, self-made woman.
She would never let the place go downhill like some clubs I've seen. It was always maintained. I feel like that makes it more solid of a place. I felt very welcomed and accepted there, and very safe too.
It gives all the ladies there something to, think about in a positive way when they're dancing. It's a 2 or 3 year stint. Most of these girls don't go longer than that. I think it eases their minds and makes the girls feel better. I'm working for a woman that understands what I'm going through right now.
So we go and speak with Steve in prison. Steve told me that he didn't know what happened to her. He told us he still loved Jennifer, but he was heartbroken, that he thought she had just left him for some other guy. But then he said Jennifer had disappeared when she was last with Scott Kimball. That once Scott was released, he did meet with Jennifer.
When Steve and Scott Kimball were cellmates, Scott claimed to know people in the coffee business and that he'd be willing to help Jennifer to establish some connections, to open her own coffee shop or some sort of a business.
After that time, she went completely dark. No one had talked to Jennifer again.
Then he said, and by the way, another cellmate lost his girlfriend when she was last with Scott Kimball. It was a repeat story of what happened between Steve Ennis and Jennifer. We found out that girl's name was Leanne Emery. She told her family she was going to go caving in Mexico with Scott Kimball. And her car was recovered right across the Utah state line. And she disappeared about 20 days before Jennifer disappeared.
Detective Thatcher and Agent Grusing went back and looked at Scott Kimball's computer, these very disturbing, horrific scenes, and they were able to identify that one of the photographs was in fact Leanne Emery.
Now we have 3 missing people: Leanne Emery, Jennifer Markham from Shotgun Willie's, and Casey McLeod, all last known to be with Scott Kimball. We called it Operation Snowball because the more you look into Scott Kimball, the worse it got. At that point, I was confident that Scott was responsible for Jennifer's death, Casey McLeod's death, Leanne Emery's disappearance, and we had no idea how many other people he had killed.
What we knew at that point was that now the tide has totally shifted. It's now time to go try to confront Scott with additional evidence.
And again, Scott denied being responsible for anybody's deaths. And then he asked, what if one of these girls disappeared on National Forest land? I could see that Scott was leaving breadcrumbs. I had receipts from the day and week surrounding Casey's disappearance. One of those receipts was from a grocery store in Walden, Colorado.
Walden, Colorado, which is about 2 hours north of the Denver area, is a remote area surrounded by National Forest land.
I called Walden National Forest, and they said they'd recovered a hiker up there the winter before. A hunter had found a skull when he was up on the side of a mountain.
Agent Grusing and Detective Thatcher immediately drove to the Walden area to secure those human remains and get them sent off to Quantico for DNA testing. It was confirmed that those human remains belonged to Casey McLeod.
The emotions you must have been feeling.
I still feel them now. It was this like mix of, I mean, just complete, like, this sounds crazy, but like joy, like, oh my gosh, we finally found Casey. But it still hits you in your heart that she is deceased.
It was a game changer. I was thrilled that we might actually be able to charge Scott with homicide.
But as Casey's remains were reviewed, we were never able to determine how Casey had died. Those families, they were so desperate to find their daughters. And the only way we were going to do that is making a deal with Scott Kimball. We sat down and began to negotiate, and the deals began to be struck. Scott would provide us the information to lead us to the human remains of Leanne Emery, Jennifer Markham, and plead guilty to murdering Casey McLeod. In exchange, we would not prosecute him for the murders of Jennifer and Leanne, but he was going to have to do an act of good faith first, meaning there's no negotiation on those financial crimes that we had been prosecuting, and so we did. In December of 2008, Scott Kimball walked into court in Boulder County, and he pled guilty to the financial crimes, and he was immediately sentenced to 48 years in prison.
Once the deal was set, Scott asked for a piece of paper. He drew 2 squares on it to be Colorado and Utah, and he put little X's where Jennifer's remains were and Leanne's remains were. He said they're 15 miles from each other, they're in the mountains of Utah, and I can get you to both of them in one day. There's a caravan of like 20 SUVs because we have the sheriff, SWAT team, evidence response team, his attorneys, prosecutors. It was quite the show.
There was an incredible amount of logistics and planning that had to be planned, that Scott would be, you know, in shackles, both his hands and feet at all times. There were dedicated armed riflemen on Scott at all times. And I remember watching people on the streets because it looked like this motorcade of very important officials. I think people thought, is the president in town? And people would stop and watch this just motorcade of big black SUVs as we traveled out of town and traveled into Utah. Scott got out of one of those black SUVs, and you could see almost the glee as he looked around and saw this entire production for him to tell us where these girls were. And he knew he was the one in control.
We drive across the Utah line, and they're never-ending horseshoe canyons called the Book Cliffs, and they just extend for miles and miles. Scott is super certain where Jennifer's gonna be, and he says it's right by a ranch gate, so we chose to go directly there to recover Jennifer. And he pointed to one or two sites where we should dig. Our evidence team dug in those beds and discovered nothing. Scott was unapologetic. He simply just moved to another creek bed and said he was standing on the place where Jennifer might be.
After 2 very long, intense days of searching, we found nothing. And that's when it first hit me, and I got a terrible feeling in my stomach. We just made a deal with the devil.
The next morning, we walked down a dry creek bed. Scott looked to the right and said, let's go the other way, but something was off. So I started walking up this cliff face, and I come up on a hair clip, and inside it was brown hair, which fit Leanne. It was hard. It was difficult for me to even speak, so once I got my voice is when I yelled, I think I found Leanne.
We spent the entire day recovering Leanne's remains. We eventually located a bullet casing right below the hair clip. Just the terror she must have felt when she was shot in the back of the head. It just felt devastating. We had now recovered Casey McLeod and Leanne Emery, but we still needed to go recover Jennifer Markham. We went back at a different time. I am 100% convinced, without a doubt, that Scott knows exactly where she is. When we were out there in this area with Scott, and we were walking along this, kind of gully, and Scott tapped his foot, tapped it on the ground and said, "Merry Christmas, dig here." There was a big group of us, including myself. We got out the shovels and we were digging. In the meantime, they took Scott away from the area. It's a very rocky area. It's mostly like kind of reddish, brownish dirt everywhere. I was giddy, like beyond excitement, that finally we were gonna bring Jennifer home to the Markhams. And we dug and never found Jennifer.
He started pointing to other canyons. Well, then maybe she's in this canyon, and he would be just as excited about one canyon over. But it was just him playing games. All of our hopes that he was going to cooperate pretty much evaporated. It was going to be just us exploring canyons infinitely, to the point where we all said, "We're done, Scott."
We had made multiple efforts to try to find her, but we were never successful. I think all of our hearts hurt for the Markhams that they didn't get to get Jennifer back. We did take the family out there to the location that we believed Jennifer Markham to have been killed and buried, and it was an incredibly difficult and emotional time to be out there with them. And we just gave them their privacy to be able to grieve. There wasn't a dry eye. I remember looking down and, even the FBI agents standing there with their rifles, had some tears dropping down. Scott had not fulfilled the terms of his agreement, and he's not willing to give back Jennifer. And Scott was now required to come in and plead to multiple counts of second-degree murder. We wanted to hold him accountable for the murders he committed, and let's bring these families some closure and resolve.
I was happy when I found out Scott was caught. It was quite a while after, everything had happened. So I had a staff meeting and talked about what happened. I wanted them to have, closure in their hearts.
Knowing Scott got arrested was a big sigh of relief for everybody. And it's just so much heartbreak.
I watched him next to his two defense attorneys, looking pathetically weak and beat down and no longer in control.
Scott Lee Kimball, the cause of death of Jennifer Markham, Leanne Emery, and Casey McLeod. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I even get emotional now because of the victims. These were great people who their lives were cut too short by a monster.
Casey Dawn McLeod was my firstborn daughter. I was present right there the very first moment she took her first breath. Scott Kimball was there to take her last.
Scott Kimball has destroyed our lives. Our lives will never be the same. How many other people are missing as a result of his life?
Thank God they gave him 70 years, because anything less would be a joke. And I hope he rots in jail for the rest of his life for what he did to her. She will never be forgotten.
I want people to remember Jennifer as a great mother, a person that cared about other people, and that loved life and was doing her best.
She was exactly who she was from the time I knew her in 3rd grade. She was a kind person. She trusted people. She gave them their all. She is missed, but we are grateful to have what we had of her.